Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited about today's video because I'm going to be recommending some steamy books for you guys. So these aren't necessarily my favorite books, but they're books that I've read in the past few years that stand out in my head because they were, kind of steamier than some other books that I have read. So for today's video, I want to kind of do speed round, kind of go super fast through the books, not spend, a few minutes on each book, but kind of give you, the name of the book, the title, the genre, maybe like a sentence or two about the book, my rating on a scale of 1 to 5, and then a steaminess level on a scale of 1 to 3. All the books on this list are steamy. There aren't any that are just like kind of, PG-13. They all have some level of steam, but then, in addition to that, they're kind of on a scale, right? So some books are more steamy than others. So I didn't want to say, oh, well, these are all just steamy books, go read them. I kind of wanted to give you a scale of if you want to, dip your toes into the water, maybe start with like a 1 or a 2. If you want to go there, go for one of the 3s. I just thought with Valentine's Day, it's the perfect time to do it, and this is going to actually be part 1 of 2 because, not gonna lie, I read a lot of steamy books, so I have a lot to recommend to you guys today. So yeah, I'm going to be popping up kind of like all the information you need right here. So I'm not going to be holding up the books, but I'm going to pop up like this little like scorecard, kind of like a video game type of situation. So you'll be able to see the book, the genre, my rating on a scale from 1 to 5, and again, the steaminess level on a scale of 1 to 3. And just so you guys know, with my ratings, I really don't rate anything below a 3. So if it's a 3, I didn't really love the book. If it's a 5, I loved it and recommended it. So again, I'll go into a little bit detail with each book, but so this video isn't super long. Let's jump right in. Okay, so let's jump in hot right here. And the first series that I want to talk about is the Girl Meets Duke series by Tessa. And this is a historical romance series where each book focuses on a different girl in like this friend group. So our first book focuses on one, second book on another, etc., etc. So I personally rated these books a 5 out of 5. I think they're so fun. They're kind of typical historical romance. We have this girl, we have this guy who's, of higher title, higher rank, and they come together, right? So I rated these books a 5 out of 5, and I give them a 3 out of 3 on the steaminess scale, if you will. They're steamy. Like, if you want a steamy book, read the Girl Meets Duke series by Tessa. Yeah. Okay, the next series that I want to talk about is the Nevernight Chronicles by Kristoff. And this is a dark fantasy series where we follow our main character, Mia, and she, I guess, basically goes to assassin school so she can train in order to become an assassin so she can avenge her parents and her brother's death because they were killed. So that's all I'm going to say about it, but I didn't really love this series. I just thought it was I thought the first book was okay, and then it kind of just felt like the second and third book were the first books, just like over and over again, just slightly different. But if you're looking for something steamy, I do give this a 3 out of 3 on the steaminess scale. It's like, okay. Honestly, I would even say that this series is a little bit too vulgar for me. There was times when the author would describe things in such detail, I'm not going to say it here because I actually just can't, where I was just like, ooh, that's a lot. Like, I don't want to be reading this. And then I'm like in the room with other people and I'm like, if they knew what I was reading right now. So yeah, not my favorite series, but definitely steamy. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is Outlander by Gabaldon, and I'm only talking about the first book, not the whole series, because I've only read the first book of the series. And this is a fantasy romance series where we follow our main character, Claire, and she accidentally travels back in time from the mid-1900s to the mid-1700s, where she meets Jamie Fraser, this like, handsome, rugged, tough, like 1700s Scotsman? Let's go with that. And yeah, obviously it's a romance book, so you can guess what happens between the characters. So I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite book. I thought it was good, but it was just so long. It's like 900 pages or something like that. And there is definitely times where you feel like it drags, and also, I mean, I talk about this in a previous video. I'll link that down below if you're thinking about reading Outlander, but it just kind of bad thing after bad thing after bad things happen, and it's just like, it's frustrating to read. Also, if you get triggered by rape and sexual assault, I would not recommend reading this book. It is very prominent, which, you know, is fair because of the times and, you know, things like that unfortunately happened commonly in the 1700s, but I just wanted to kind of give that trigger warning in case that stuff bothers you. So yeah, for steaminess, I would give it a 2 out of 3 because the, you know, steaminess levels are actually pretty good, except for when it kind of becomes non-consensual. Then it's like, ooh, but I don't really count that as steamy. I consider that, you know, non-consensual rape, unfortunately, is part of this book. But the steamy parts where everyone's in agreement is a 2 out of 3. And the steaminess is pretty good, but again, I just don't love the book as a whole. Okay, the next series that I want to talk about is a series that I've talked about many a times, but it needs to be included in this list, and that is The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Jensen. And this is a fantasy romance series. Ugh, so good. We follow our main character, Lara. She is trained as an assassin, and her dad sends her over to a foreign kingdom basically to assassinate the king. But when she gets there, she learns that King Aaron, the guy she is supposed to marry under false pretense, is actually a really good guy, and she doesn't know if she can go through with this plan. So that is kind of the premise of the book. It is a 5 out of 5 for sure for me. I'm obsessed with this series. I think it is so good. As far as steam, I would say this is actually on the lower end. I would give it a 1 out of 3 on the steaminess scale because it's not overly in-your-face steam, but what I love so much about this book is the slow burn between our two characters. We have, you know, they meet the beginning and they kind of are feeling each other out, seeing kind of what the deal is, and then when we finally get to the like physical steam, it's just like such a good build-up, and like the slow burn is just like what makes the scene at the end that much better. So if you're into something that's a little bit more lighter and you know you like it, it's good, but you don't want it to be overwhelming, then I would highly recommend The Bridge Kingdom. I mean, I would highly recommend it anyway because I just love it, but again, if you're, you know, testing the waters with steam, you don't really know if you want to go like you jump into the deep end, then The Bridge Kingdom is a great place to start. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is The Aris Get by Harper St. George, and this is another historical romance, and we follow our main character, who's this American heiress who is currently living in England, and people are kind of trying to tell her she has to mold into the traditional English, you know, bride to be, and she's basically like, nah, that's not for me. I want to be a business owner. I want to take over my family business, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm basically just not going to listen to you people. So first of all, great book, 5 out of 5. Highly recommend if you're looking for a good historical romance. And as far as steaminess, I would give this a 2 out of 3. In my opinion, this book is basically like the perfect amount of steaminess, and the like intimacy story is really good too. We have these two characters who meet, and they kind of have this like banter, they form this kind of like friendship, and you watch them kind of slowly fall for each other, have this like sexual tension, slow burn, and then all kind of comes to that like, you know, happy ending, if you will. So I love the whole intimacy part of this story. I think it's done really well. I think it feels somewhat realistic of like they meet, they kind of had this like flirty relationship, and then they end up actually really liking each other, and it just feels a little bit more realistic than some of these, you know, super heavy steam where it's like, relax, like, whoa, or like, you know, books where it's like, oh, they go the whole book and they just kiss, and it's like, come on, give me a little bit more than that, you know? So I think this book is a really good happy medium if maybe you know you like steam, but you don't want it to be overwhelming. The Aris Get is a really good happy medium. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series, which is a fantasy romance series, and this is one of my all-time favorite fantasy romance series, so I highly recommend it. I'm not going to go into what the 5th book is about because I don't want to ruin the previous books, but I talk about that book in other videos, so I'll link that down below. Because obviously, as I just said, this is one of my favorite fantasy romance series. I do give this book a 5 out of 5. I give this whole series a 5 out of 5. It's really good. And as far as the steaminess in this book, which is one of my favorite aspects of this particular book in the series, I give it a 2 out of 3. And again, it kind of hits that like perfect happy medium for me, where we've had this build up, the relationships have been developing for books, you know, they want it, we want it, everyone is like getting there, but it's like that slow burn, that sexual tension, that like for whatever reason is keeping them apart, and then we finally get to the climax, if you will. Sorry, that was so cheesy, but we get there, and I don't want to ruin anything, so I'm not going to say names, I'm not going to say what, but this book, so good. But I highly recommend the whole series, if you can't tell by the way I'm talking about it. Okay, the next book that I want to talk about is Wallbanger by Alice Clayton, and this is a contemporary romance, and you could probably guess by the name that there's obviously a lot of steam. I mean, it's literally called Wallbanger. And this is, as I said, a contemporary romance where we follow our main character, Caroline, and she just moved into like this fancy new apartment building, and she's super excited. And on her first night there, she gets to be kind of front row and center to her neighbor's nightly activities, I guess you could say. So she hears him, you know, doing his thing on the other side of the wall. So I don't really love contemporary romances, and after reading this book, that kind of, you know, feeling kind of held true. It's definitely not my favorite book. I do give it a 3 out of 5. And I just actually read this book, so I'm going to talk about it more in my wrap-up video at the end of this month. But yeah, I just felt like the way they talked wasn't realistic. Nobody talks like, hey you, like blah blah blah, like nobody says stuff like that, right? It's just unrealistic. So that's just kind of my issue with contemporary romance as a whole. So again, I give this book a 3 out of 5. Wasn't bad, definitely not my favorite book. I would recommend a lot of other books above it. But as far as steaminess, damn Alice, okay, like 3 out of 3 for sure. Like, she doesn't hold back, especially at the end. I'm like, all right, all right. So yeah, if you're looking for a steamy book and you like contemporary romance, Wallbanger. Okay, and the last series that I want to talk about today is the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning, and this is a, I guess, like contemporary fantasy that takes place in like modern day Dublin, Ireland. We follow our main character Mac, and after she learns about the death of her sister, who was in Ireland at the time, and Mac is in America, she flies over to Ireland to just kind of investigate and figure out what really happened to her sister. And when she gets there, she's basically thrown into this like fantastical world, and now she kind of has to figure out, you know, what's going on here, what happened to my sister, and how do I make sure that that doesn't happen to me, right? So definitely not my favorite fantasy series, but it's not bad. I would say that depending on what book you read, it's either like a 3 to 4 out of 5 stars. Like, some of the books are better than others. Some of them are like, oh, that felt like a filler, and she probably could have like combined these books and it would have been like more interesting as a whole, right? But then as far as steaminess, I would say it kind of again depends on the book. Some of the books are kind of a 1 out of 3. They have steam, but it's, you know, a little bit more gentle, a little bit more easily digestible, if you will, whereas some of the books are definitely a 3 out of 3. Like, can't read them when you're with other people books. And like, honestly, I think at some point I was like reading this, like, you know, the like steamiest part of this series, and I was like, how do people even like come up with this? Like, that is crazy. Like, I guess it's entertaining, but like, I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, not my favorite series, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit steamier, fantastical, you know, if you like Ireland maybe, then the Fever series isn't bad and I would recommend it. Okay, so that is all I have for part 1 of this video. Again, as I said before, I am going to be making a part 2. I just had too many books to mention and I didn't want this video to be super long. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys can take something out of it. If you are looking for something steamy, you have some books to go through. So let me know in the comments down below if you end up picking up any of these books, or if there's any super steamy books that you guys would recommend to me, because I definitely don't mind some steam in my books. But yeah, that is it. Please like this video because it really supports my channel. Please subscribe if you are not already, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!